Hello and welcome back to another episode of World Traveler Commentary. So far we've talked about liberalism, we've talked about fascism, we've talked about social democracy. Today I'm going to talk about socialism, primarily because socialism is one of those nebulous words that Americans use to refer to anything they don't like through a lot of internalized propaganda from World War II. I think it's time to kind of set something of the record straight in terms of this term. And I just kind of want to talk about it a little bit and see where things go. Now, when we get back and kind of understand the failures of liberalism and capitalism, what we see is that one of the primary failures is the idea that liberalism is a social theory and capitalism is an economic structure. Supporting that lead to largely isolated individuals and the overall breakdown of important social institutions, right? And so the idea that the state or the government, probably not the state per se necessarily, but that governmental structures need to cultivate and take care of society really becomes the major issue with socialism as a series of movements against capitalism. Now, what this means is that socialism isn't really a movement and it's not really a thing. It is in fact a whole series of things that are largely noted together because they see the same problem and they try to fix the same problem. It doesn't really mean that they have a lot in common with each other. The term socialism can be, and for this reason, applied to all kinds of things. It can be applied to Marxist socialism and revolutionary socialism, for example. And I suppose I should at some point do like a quick bit on the social philosophy and economic philosophy of Marxism and where I think it goes wrong also. But it can also be applied to social democracy, which we've talked about, Christian democracy, which we'll talk about soon. It can also be applied toward things like fascism, primarily because fascism also saw the same problem and tried to resolve it. And in fact, Marxist socialism and fascism both shared the unwillingness to rethink the Hobbesian state. I think Marx's thoughts come about in reaction to the Paris Commune and the crushing of the Paris Commune. But this is a different situation than you see with, say, Christian democracy, which has a very, very different concept of the state behind it. And I think social democracy, as we've already seen, has a different concept of the state behind it. So what this means is that when you actually look at implementation of socialism in different places and in different times, you see this amazing diversity of it. In fact, you can look at Europe through the Cold War not as divided between capitalist and socialist systems, but divided between Marxist socialist systems on the east side of the Berlin Wall and the Iron Curtain, and non-Marxist socialist systems elsewhere. There was a very strong realization that these were real problems that needed to be addressed. And different countries did that differently, right? In fact, the Austrian state flag is still the only flag I know of for an actual government on a national level, which has a hammer and a sickle on it today. Those are in the talons of the eagle on the Austrian state flag. You can look it up. But also, not just within Europe. If you look at Indonesia, Indonesia's first president, Sukarno, considered himself to be a Marxist. But he differed from the Marxists in very, very, very deep ways. As a result, the implementation of socialism in Indonesia under Sukarno looked a lot more like that of Christian democracy in Germany, but even more radical from both sort of an anti-Marxist and an anti-capitalist perspective, in that the whole concept of the state and the society was much more fragmented under Sukarno than I think it was even under the early Christian Democrats in sort of the early German Empire. So now, having said all of this, what can we actually say about socialism? The answer is not very much, right? I mean, if you have a label of things that is that broad, the label really can only address the problem and not the solutions, right? The common problem seen. And so this is something where, the socialist understanding that there's a problem is pretty obviously correct. Different socialist groups differ about solutions, but who's correct on those? Well, we'll have to learn from each other, right? What this means is that as we move much more into a multipolar, post-capitalist world, a lot of the disagreements and differences between socialist movements are going to become much more relevant. In the interplay and synthesis of these national consensus building is going to be a critical aspect of things moving forward. We need to be very careful to make sure that we don't slide into the Hobbesian nightmares of fascism or such. And basically that's all I have to say about this. Hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and have a great day.